So I'll get started. Hi everyone. My name is Anand. I'm a product manager at Amazon Web Services. I've been at Amazon and AWS for 5 years now. In fact, across different businesses. My current focus is on modern applications, working with developers and working with customers to innovate on AWS with all our modern compute services and EFS. As part of that, I also work with various teams within AWS that integrate with EFS that we'll talk about, such as the various container services as well as AWS Lambda. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about modern applications and how you can and how you can really move faster with a simple serverless and set and forget storage solution. Uh, so with that, I'll just give you a quick overview of what I plan to cover today. So I'll give you a quick introduction to Amazon Elastic File System, go a little deeper into use cases and some features, and then I'll jump into modern application development. What does modern app development actually mean? What does it mean in the why do you need EFS and persistent storage for modern application development with containers and Lambda? Then I'll talk about a little bit of security and developer and administrative best practices, and then I'll also switch over to my AWS account and show you a quick walkthrough and demo as well. And meanwhile, I really want to make this interactive, so please feel free uh, to ask questions at any time in the chat. Maybe I'll lean on you, Anas, and maybe to help bring in some of the questions as we go along. So I'll just pause and see if you have any questions, and then we can go through them, just so that I can answer them and everybody else can get the benefit as well. I
Yes,
can hear
sure,
the
sure.
answer.
I will read them out. I'll pause you
Sure.
if there's some question.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So maybe let's start at a slightly higher level, right? So when we really talk about customers, EFS really, from a storage perspective, really helps meets customers where you are, and then also where you want to be tomorrow, right? So a lot of customers have applications that are in various stages of AWS. Of the AWS cloud journey. So for example, some applications might be still in your own data center or some other place, and you're looking to migrate to AWS and you want to migrate faster, right, without having to change your application. In some cases, your application is already running on AWS and you're looking to modernize it, make it containerized, build microservices into the application, and so on. And then sometimes you may have cloud native applications. You're building net new applications on AWS, right? And so you really want to move faster and really improve your developer efficiency and enter new markets. So we'll talk about how EFS it really is specifically helps you in the latter two, which is modernizing and really innovating on AWS, and really how it helps accelerate that process. So the key thing that I want to call about from a EFS perspective is that it's serverless shared file storage, right? So what that means is it's a file system that works across compute services, whether it's EC2, container services, as well as Lambda, or even SageMaker, right? So irrespective of where your what sort of compute your application uses, EFS can be used. When you connect to a file system, you can connect to a file system using clients that reside anywhere. So it could be in your on-premises server, so you could connect using AWS VPN or AWS Direct Connect, or you could connect using or if you're connecting from within AWS, you can connect it within the same VPC or another VPC. Right. So let me start off with what is EFS, right? So EFS is, think of EFS as, we launched EFS back in 2016. So it's been close to 5 years, and it's to give customers a super simple set and forget, fully managed cloud native file system, right? And since then, we have seen great adoption from customers who have used EFS for a wide variety of use cases, and we'll talk through that in this session as well. So EFS is really simple and easy to get started. All you need is with a couple of clicks, you can stand up a file system, and then it automatically scales up and down. So let's say that you have an application that has petabytes of data. you really don't have to worry about saying, hey, okay, my file system needs to have 2 petabytes or 5 petabytes of data or 100 terabytes, right? Just keep adding data to it. The file system, EFS, or your file system automatically expands. You remove data, your file system automatically scales down or contracts, right? So you really don't have to do anything. All you need to tell us is, I want to create a file system, and that is it. Right. From a performance perspective, many of you might be familiar with the notion of throughput and IOPS and latencies and so on. Right. So EFS provides tens of gigabytes per second of throughput and several 500,000 plus IOPS, in fact. And we provide less than a few milliseconds of latency as well. So really for those low latency applications. It's highly durable and available. So we have 4 nines of availability SLA. We are designed for 11 nines of durability as well. Okay. And then compute integration. So it works for across compute services, not just EC2. Remember I mentioned containers, serverless, and it supports tens of thousands of connections as well. Right. So you mean you can have tens of thousands of Lambda functions, tens of thousands of containers or instances connecting concurrently to the same file system. So it really scales from that perspective as well. So now I'll get into a little deeper into what it means. So EFS has a regional. We have 2 storage classes. One is the Amazon EFS standard, what we call the regional service. So what that means is that it's highly available and durable. We provide 4 nines of availability SLA and 11 nines of data durability. And we do this and we achieve these levels of durability and availability by redundantly storing the data across multiple availability zones, right? So what that means is your write, so let's say you write to your EFS file system, it isn't acknowledged back to you until the data is durably written to multiple availability zones within that region. So what that means is for you is that your file system can withstand the full loss of an availability zone in the unlikely event that occurs, while still providing the same quality of service in the other availability zones. And so this sort of redundancy is really transformational, right? It really changes things for businesses or customers that typically, if you're used to working in one data center, right, or maybe a second data center. So this is really transformational from that perspective. In addition, right, even though it's regional redundancy, we also have native integration with AWS Backup as well, which is AWS's native backup service. And so you can back up your file system to AWS Backup and then store the backups in different regions as well. So if you want that additional data protection, right? Very recently, in fact, just in March, we also announced a new storage class called Amazon EFS OneZone. And what we really heard from, and the reason we launched this was, and the reason we launched this was the fact that we heard from customers that while they love the durability and the availability of a regional service, they want there are some use cases such as dev test, database backups, and those sort of workloads that don't require the redundancy of having multiple or storing it across multiple availability zones. Right, and so we launched Amazon EFS OneZone, in which your data is now stored in a single availability zone. And where that helps is from a cost perspective, right? So Amazon EFS OneZone is 47% cheaper than the regional service, only because we are not storing the data across multiple availability zones. And so it comes with 3 nines of availability SLA as opposed to 4 nines, as you just saw previously as well. Right, and that's because the data is stored only in a single availability zone. However, again, we do have integration with AWS Backup. And what that again means is while your data from an EFS perspective is stored in a single availability zone, you can back up the data to AWS Backup and then store the data in a different region, in a different availability zone, and any of that, right? So you really get that additional data protection. So your data isn't just stored in one zone. You can, in a single availability zone, you can actually back it up to AWS Backup and then store it in a different region. So the next thing I really want to talk about are the various integrations that EFS as a file system really provides. Many of this you might already be familiar with. We integrate with Amazon CloudWatch for monitoring file system. I'll show you that. Uh, but the more key thing that I really want to call out is the integration with the various compute services, EC2, Fargate, Lambda, ECS, EKS, right? And we'll go into detail there as well. But we recently also launched support for AWS Transfer. So where the AWS Transfer really shines when you integrate with EFS is now you can get data from your customers or your partners through FTP or SFTP and directly put it into EFS. Right, and then you can, and then let's say you want to do some sort of processing, and then you can share it again through an FTP or SFTP endpoint to people who want to, or your customers who want to consume that data. Right. The last thing I want to talk about before we really go into modern application development is purely from a cost perspective. So Amazon EFS is cost optimized. There are no minimum commitments or fees. You don't need to provision storage in advance. And we also provide automated lifecycle management where let's say that you have data in EFS and you're not using the data often, we automatically move that data into a lower cost storage tier, saving you up to 90% in cost because you're really using the data, right? You really are not using that data. So let's talk about modern application development, right? So why do you really want to modernize? But before we get into that, let's talk about what is modernization as well. So modern application development is any time when you create an application using modern techniques or services. So these could include creating applications in containers or serverless to be more agile, to scale up or scale down. You could also be using continuous development, continuous integration, commonly known as CI/CD, to deliver applications faster, right? And anytime you're using these sort of techniques to make your applications do more for you, you move faster, you become more agile, and you can really meet the needs of your customers much faster, right? And so what that means is that traditional storage that you when we spoke to our customers really doesn't when I mean traditional storage, I mean, let's say a traditional network attached storage or self-managed in cloud storage, right? So they have typically difficulty in scaling. So they frequently run out of space, right? And which means that you now have to buy more servers, more storage hardware, sometimes which can take days, months, and so on. The next thing is lack of agility because you're constantly having to forecast on your storage needs. Your storage team needs to be involved. You need to keep an eye on storage all the time, right? And so you're focusing less on your business and more on storage, which you really shouldn't be doing, right? You should be focusing on the business logic so that you can meet your customers and grow your business rather than focusing on IT storage, right? And the last is just the administrative additional administrative overhead of managing and monitoring infrastructure. So you need to replace your hardware and so on. And so when we talk about modern applications, we are also seeing customers taking existing applications and modernizing them, right? So for example, there are a lot of opportunities to modernize applications that are running on EC2, put them in containers and launch them on container services, right? So with this, you reduce your application or your operational burden, and so it really helps. So the next obvious question is, why do you need persistent storage for modern applications? So many of the applications already rely on persistent storage for what you're doing, right? So they may be sharing data across multiple instances. You might be sharing data across various resources of your application. So whether it's instances or containers, it might be more of a stateful application. So as when you modernize your application, you really want to modernize your storage as part of that. Right. So let's get into use cases. So at this point, I'll pause. Are there any questions from the audience from any of you? I want to make sure that I answer anything. I'll get into some of the details and how to get set up. But so far, any questions?
So Quinn and Ali are taking care of it. Anand, don't worry. It's
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, great. But I really feel free to ask any questions and just keep the interaction going. So, but if there's any interesting question that I can probably answer for the group as a whole, let me know as well, right? So let's get into some use cases, right? So as I talked about, a lot of containerized applications really need persistent storage because you might be building stateful applications, you might be looking at shared data sets and so on. And so what we really see customers doing is there are kind of two categories. One is long-running stateful applications, and the other is kind of shared data sets where they share data with other containers. And so four common use cases that we see are developer tools. So applications such as Jira, Git, Artifactory, Jenkins, and so on. And where you really, let's say you're building a CI/CD pipeline, you want to ensure consistency of build test environments. You want to ensure consistency of your build artifacts across those environments. So by using EFS as a store, you can now have a low latency way of really making sure that you have one source of for all of those artifacts, right? So it really reduces the chance of application misconfiguration and so on. The next use case is content management. And so this is running websites based on WordPress or Drupal, and those are fairly common. Many of you might be familiar with that. And customers and what we've seen customers really doing is building digital experiences or websites on containers using EFS, right, and WordPress. And the reason they do that is because by using EFS, they can automatically scale, right? Let's say you built a website. Let's say your website is doing really well. You get like tens of thousands of users coming to your website. You really want your website to scale, right? And you want your storage to automatically scale. And so by using EFS, as I mentioned, EFS automatically scales. It's highly available. So you really don't have to worry about EFS at all. You can just stay assured that EFS will kind of take care of it, right? So it automatically scales. It's highly available. And so your website can really scale to meet your peak user load. The next two things that we see are from machine learning or machine learning and shared home directories sort of workloads, right? So for example, if you have applications such as Tableau or RStudio or Jupyter Notebooks, you really want home directories for various users so that they can store their artifacts and so on. Right, so that's a very common use case we see from a containers and EFS perspective. And last is machine learning. So customers running machine learning frameworks such as MXNet or PyTorch, for example, on containers. So I'll just quickly talk about a very simple how it really fits together if you want to do data science with EFS, right? So at a high level, you can see one of the main benefits of EFS for data science is that it easily integrates with other tools that are required to perform the analytics. At its foundation, obviously EFS provides shared storage that can be accessed across teams and by all the applications and services that make up your data science environment. Okay. So I'm talking about applications such as RStudio, TensorFlow, which can be really deployed across various compute environments. So from bare metal instances to self-managed Kubernetes clusters to EKS or ECS. Right. So basically, you will have shared project folders that teams will use to share common data sets, and then the results of those data science models can then be stored on EFS, and you can start visualizing and doing those sort of applications. So the next thing is for EFS for Lambda, right? So many of you might be familiar with Lambda already, and you know that Lambda has a limit in terms of the size of the Lambda of the temporary storage, which is close to 512 MB via the temporary space, right? And so customers can now operate on large data and something as simple as even a 1 gigabyte of file size with just a few lines of code. Right, so now you can have tens of thousands of Lambda functions really executing on a simple on a single file system with very, very low latency. And so EFS allows clients to access parts of a larger file, right? And so and it also does it as a pay-as-you-go as well. So it really, from a cost perspective and cost, scale, latency, performance perspective, it really enables new workloads. And the kind of workloads it really enables with EFS are uh, primarily around large-scale media processing, machine learning, and analytics, right? So typically what we've seen is the use cases fall under two categories. The first is, let's say that you're reading and writing files from Lambda functions, such as maybe an ETL pipeline, right, or a data processing pipeline. And so you need to read and write large files, 600 MB, 700 MB, 2 gig, 3 gig of data. And so there's no place to put it in the Lambda temporary storage, right? And so what customers usually do is they simply attach an EFS file system to their Lambda function, and that way you get almost unlimited storage space. So think about it, you have unlimited storage space now that you can use a Lambda function to really operate on. Another category is what we call reference data. So these are some use cases where you have some bit of data that needs to be shared across across various invocations of your Lambda function, which you otherwise won't be able to do, right? So a common example is, let's say, is machine learning inference. So let's say that you have a shared set of libraries or ML models, and this could be, let's say, you're doing image classification, sentiment analysis, image recognition, voice, natural language processing, NLU, or any sort of machine learning inference applications, right? And so every time your Lambda function gets called, you can automatically call in your make a call to EFS, and then operate on your machine learning model. And because EFS also has a local cache with Lambda, it's really fast because it won't necessarily run it over the network. It caches it at a Lambda container level, right? So it's really fast. And so because it's highly concurrent, tens of thousands of Lambda functions can access file system. It makes it really fast. So you have low latency, very high performance as well, and at very low cost. Another use case that we see is media processing, right? So let's say that you have a lot of images, you want to edit them, or you have large number of video files, you want to encode or transcode them. So that's where you can store all of those files on EFS and get really low latency there. So I'll get into as a little amount of detail as well on those two use cases, right? So first thing is with ML, AI, ML, and analytics with Lambda, you can import large AI models really quickly, right? And you can do that by storing the model on EFS, and then your Lambda function just executes or just accesses the machine learning model. So as the model updates, the model gets larger. You really don't have to worry about any of that. EFS all automatically takes care of the storage. If you're doing media processing, so it could be images, videos, audio recordings, you can do a bunch of things such as editing images on the fly, sharing the images to your customers or your partners, and then you can start editing your files as well. So the next thing is, when should I use EFS and EBS? So many of you might be familiar with EBS. So the more common use cases are around EBS is direct attached storage, right? So if you don't need shared storage, and you just want to attach it to an EC2 instance or to a single container, then EBS is the right fit, right? But if you remember, I said that EFS works across availability zones and so on. So if you build cross AZ architectures or cross AZ failover architectures, EFS is a great fit, right? So if you're looking for a large amount of very small IO, such as you're building in databases, then likely EBS is a good fit. But for databases, I would recommend using RDS anyway, right? So so that would be the more common use case. So because think about it, data in a container is a transient, right? So which means if the container crashes, it starts up in a clean state, and the data is lost. Right. So for stateful applications, so that change over time, such as, let's say, Jupyter notebooks or DevOps or those sort of applications that I talked about, you really want to maintain that state. So from a performance perspective, the main differences, if you think about it from a EFS and EBS perspective, are there are three attributes: throughput, IOPS, and latency. So with throughput and IOPS, you're fairly comparable between EBS and EFS. With out of the box with EFS, you get 35,000 read IOPS and 7K write IOPS. So it scales pretty high. So latency is I would say is a slight difference. So latency is every time you do an operation uh, uh, to return from the storage. And so with EFS, since we write it to multiple availability zones, as I said, there's a slight additional latency, right? So EFS does low single digit millisecond of latency. And EBS does sub-millisecond latency because it doesn't necessarily have to store the data across multiple availability zones, right? So that's another consideration. If you want the cross AZ architecture built in, but you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of latency for that, so that you have that cross AZ architecture experience, then EFS is the right fit. But if you're looking for single AZ, non-shared, very low latency sort of applications, then EBS is a good fit. At this point, a common question that we also hear is, hey, what's the difference between EFS and S3, right? So the main difference between EFS and S3 is in two areas. One is API, and the other is access pattern of your workload. So when I say API, if you're modernizing an existing application that already uses a lot of file-related use cases, such as you open files, close files, you edit files, then using EFS is really the right fit, because you really don't have to rewrite your application or do any of that, right? And so EFS is literally meant to access files, open files, and edit files at scale, right? And so if you think about, let's say, machine learning applications and so on. So the next thing is, the second thing is your access pattern of the workload, right? So every time, if you have workloads that require continuous access, machine learning, media images, right? Those sort of workloads, then EFS really shines there, because EFS provides caching under the hood. So with Lambda, if you use an existing container, you have a cold start, but after that, your data will be instantaneous access. It doesn't have to access over the network, right? And then finally, purely from a cost perspective, depending again on your access pattern of your workload, if you're accessing your files really quickly, you don't have to pay for data access on EFS, because you only pay for the data that is stored. You don't pay for data access. So if you're constantly reading and writing on your EFS file system, you don't pay for those reads and writes. You only pay for the underlying storage, right? So you can make as many reads and writes as possible as you need. So I'll just quickly talk to you about two customers who have really used this, right? And these are two in slightly different categories. The first is Asurion. So Asurion uses EFS and Lambda, and Asurion is primarily they use EFS to do sentiment analysis of their call center calls, right? So let's say that the customers call into their call center. As soon as the call ends, Asurion essentially runs a machine learning model to gauge the sentiment of the customer. Is the customer happy? Is the customer not so happy? And so on. And they immediately run that really quickly as soon as the call ends, and they run it using Lambda and EFS. Right? The call data is stored on EFS. They run the machine learning, and then they can do any follow-up actions, right? If the customer is happy, the customer is not so happy, and so on. So that's how they do real-time sentiment analysis of the customer experience, right? So a really exciting and really business impactful use case there. The other use case that we see is Acquia. So Acquia is a customer that builds. They have a Drupal-based platform where they build websites for their customers. So a customer can come in and say, "Hey, we want to build a website that does these sort of things. It provides a digital experience for our customers. We want to be doing all of this." And so Acquia goes ahead and builds those applications. So they have their own internal Drupal-based platform, right? And so what they found out was by migrating their entire Drupal-based platform to EFS, they really lowered the storage lowered their TCO costs, and reduced the administrative burden of having to worry about storage, right? So now they can focus on building their platform, improving their platform, and not having to worry about the underlying storage. And if you think about it, they can now go out, get more customers, build more websites, don't have to worry about peak user load, because they know that EFS as storage scales to petabyte scale. So don't have to worry about that. Otherwise, if they previously used traditional storage, they would now have to worry about, hey, do I have enough storage? Can it scale? We plan to get more customers this year. Okay, so now we need to buy more storage. All of that goes away, right? So now I'll quickly talk about getting started, and then I'll switch to a demo. So I'll just give you a quick primer on getting started. Right? So when you talk, let's talk about security and identity first. So now file systems should only be mounted by the applications that need them, right? So if you have multiple applications, not every application should be able to access a file system, but at the same time, any application that accesses a file system should only access the data that they need, right? So if you have 10 applications accessing a file system, you don't want any application reading any other application's data, right? An application has a specific set of data on a file system, I should only read that, right? Another, let's say, confidential application should not be accessed. So the way that there are three sorts of authorization or authentication with EFS, right? So the first is client mount, which allows a client to mount a file system but not write any data or perform any operations, right? Or perform any operations as root. So when you do client write, as you can see here in the second, there's a client write. You can read and write as any user, but not as root, right? And then if you do root access, that's when you really give full root access to the file system, so that you can read and write as any user. So, right. So we really provide the 3 level of authorization, where you can't do anything. You can read only. You can read and write, but not as root, or you can do everything full trust, what we call full trust. So the next thing I want to quickly talk about is container identity, right? So when you talk about a container identity, your POSIX identity comes from the container image. And so if you it doesn't come at runtime or build time, right? So if somebody else built let's say an Nginx application or some sort of application and gave it to you, now the user ID or the identity is from the person who built it, and not you who are or the image are not at runtime, right? Whereas on Lambda has no identity at all, right? And so why am I talking about all of these things? When you connect to EFS, you want to make sure that your root containers don't access as root. They cannot escalate access, and you only create app specific directory or permissions, right? So remember what I talked about in terms of goals of identity. If you have an EC2 instance application, an application built on Lambda, an application built on serverless, all of them accessing the same file system, EFS allows you to make sure that each of those applications are separate. They cannot access, read, or write across each application's data. So there's complete separation of data and access within the same file system, right? And so that's what access points really does. So when you create an access point, essentially what you're saying is, okay, an application with some sort of IAM role can access your file system with a specific set of POSIX or Linux UID or group ID permissions, and they can only access a specific path of the file system. So in this example, if you see my app /app/ my app, that's the only path that the file system can that application can access, right? Another application would say /app/confidential app, right? And so this application would not be able to access that. So it really provides that additional level of security and authorization there. So with that, I will quickly get into how you get started. I'll just show you, and then I'll switch to the demo as well. So the first is from an ECS perspective. Right? So when you talk about integrating EFS with ECS, we heard from a lot of customers that previously they were doing a lot of hacky ways to really build to integrate EFS with ECS. And so what we did was really simplified the experience of setting this up. You really don't have to set up EFS at an infrastructure level. It's simply at a task definition level, right? So it's really simple to get started. If from a Lambda perspective, I'll show you. It's really simple to use. All you have to go to Lambda console and attach your file system, and that is it. So with that, I will stop sharing and switch over to my demo. Just give me a second. I'm sharing my screen. Let me switch over to my demo here. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. If there's any questions here, let me know as well. Okay.
Ananth, you have one question on spot pricing.
Yes.
And if on any advice on whether to use EFS with spot pricing or not.
Sorry, let me. So EFS can be used with spot instances. So yes. So that's a really good point. By using spot instances, obviously, as many of you know, you save a lot in terms of compute costs, and so you can really use EFS with spot instances to reduce your cost if your application is built on EC2 Spot. Yes, absolutely. Anything else? Ooh, Zoom makes it a little hard to see my entire screen. It just covers the top of and doesn't allow me to switch between tabs. Let me just do this now. Okay. Okay, so the first thing I will do is go to the EFS console. So I already have a few file systems here, but I'll really show you. So on the AWS console, if you click on file system, it's really simple, right? So you click on this, I can put in a name. Let's say my private application. And then I choose VPC. I have to choose a VPC because your file system resides within a particular VPC. And the next thing I can do is just choose the regional or one zone. And if you remember, I told you that we have two flavors where your data is stored within regional or one zone. In this case, let's say we choose regional because we are building cross AZ architectures, right? And so remember I said like within just a few clicks, you create a file system. That's all I need to do. We do have some more customizations that you can do, but we have smart defaults for all of those. So really as simple as literally just a few clicks and you're creating a file system. Because it'll take a few seconds to create a file system. I already have a file system here. And so here are some of the other customizable settings that you can change at any time, right? So we have lifecycle policy where you can say, hey, you know, if my files aren't accessed in the last 30 days, move them to infrequent access, right? So you can do it from 7 all the way to 90 days. So you can put it as low as 7 days. We do that. We also have monitoring. So typically, let's say that you want to you can look at your credits utilization, your throughput, your IOPS, and so on. So let's say I go a week. It's not a heavily utilized file system, but you can really look at your percentage IO, your client connections, and your throughput, right? So you can really monitor, and you can see this on CloudWatch as well. The next thing I want to talk about is access points. So I just talked about access points right a little while back, but I think by showing you what I can say is, for example, let's say that I have a new subsidiary. My company just bought a new subsidiary. It has a new application, right? So what I can do is I come in and then I say, okay, you know, anytime that application accesses the file system, it uses a user ID of 1001 and a group ID of 1001, right? So I can go ahead, or I can take another example where I say, this is a prototype app and the root directory is is prototype app, right? So this application only gets access to this path. No other access, no other application can access this prototype path, right? So with that, I will quickly switch to Lambda, the Lambda console. So I already have a predefined Lambda function here, but it's really simple, right? So I would just go ahead, let's say, create a Lambda function. Many of you are already familiar with this, right? But you don't have to do anything here. Once you do this, you go to my pre-created Lambda function. If you go to configuration, if you scroll down, you have file system, right? So if you go to file system here, you can just choose the file system. And that is it, right? And once you do that, you choose your access point. So in this case, my file system, my application uses my app1, and that's the access point, right? So no other application can access that access point because I've turned it off. So that's the path in the file system. So if you remember, I showed you the prototype app that has /prototype app, and this one has /my-app1. So now you can see that, hey, two different applications, they're two different paths in the file system. They can't kind of interact with each other if I choose not to. Right. So if I go back to my Lambda function, so this is a very simple Lambda function. So what it does is it's my own, let's say, text search code. So basically, what it does is there is a file. When I call this function, I can say, hey, does this text exist in that file, and it will return true or false. And I've just set up API gateway, so I can call an API to do that. Right. So let me show you how that would work, and then I show you how it really fits from an EFS perspective, right? So so I already have an API, so I'm just quickly going to run this API here. Right, so I just run this, and it shows found true, and I'll show you what that and why does it show true, because I go back to EC2, and let's say I connect to the instance, and I can actually show you the file here. Well, this show opens up a little bit. So I have my right. So it's a fairly simple text file. The word Lambda is in there. So let's say I now called this API and said, let's say I search for Dubai, right? It says, hey, there's no Dubai here, right, in the file. So let's say I make a file here. I say in Dubai session. Right. And then I say, okay, so let me quickly run this here. And then it says true, right? So you can see how quickly I was able to edit the file, and Lambda automatically picks it up, right? So it's almost, I would say, instantaneous, right? So I think that's a key point that I wanted to call out. So think about this at scale, right? So you have thousands of Lambda functions. They're making edits. Let's say they're uploading images, they're editing images. As soon as, let's say, one Lambda function edits we have read or write consistency. So makes an edit to an image, another Lambda function maybe that's wants to edit the same image, automatically gets the latest version. So it's almost it's almost instantaneous, right? From a performance perspective. So the next thing is that I want to quickly show you is on ECS, right? So I quickly showed you Lambda. Now I'll just quickly show you ECS as well. I won't show you a full demo, but really show you how really easy it is to really get started. So I'm in task definitions on ECS, right? Containers. I've created it on Fargate. So let's say I want to create a new revision. So in your task, so when you define EFS in your task definition, so it's really not in your infrastructure, right? So where does it go? Okay. go? Oh, sorry, scroll all the way down here. Yes. Yeah. So if I scroll down, when you go to volume section, it's really as simple as EFS volume configuration, right? So really that's all you need to do. So you can add it inline on the console, or you can just add it within JSON, right? So all you need to do is add your file system ID, right? Just like we did with Lambda, you can just go ahead, add your file system ID, add your access point, and your root directory, right? So, and like that is it. Once you do that, your file system is automatically mounted on your ECS cluster, and you can quickly get started. For EKS, I believe Quinn will paste the link there, but we do have EKS, the EFS CSI driver for EKS, which is essentially the interface by which EKS or Kubernetes interacts with storage volume. So it's completely open source, fairly well easy to use. Right. So I think that's all I had purely from a demo perspective in the interest of time. But what I want to quickly get back to is just walking through some best practices so that it'll really help you get started. So from a security perspective, just to summarize what we talked about, right? So you can control access using security groups, IAM, identity and resource policies, or you can using access points. You can control file and directory access using access points as we talked about. You can control API level access to say, hey, this person can create a file system, this person cannot create a file system. So you're talking about more API related actions. And then also encrypting your data in REST and in transit. So that's additional security. So from a developer best practices perspective, I would say start with the general purpose mode that we have. Consider using provision throughput, use multiple threads. So I think the main thing is on the bottom three. So EFS is a distributed system, distributed storage system. So the more number of instances or resources or Lambda functions you have, the more threads that you have, you'll get the better performance you will get. Right. And from an administrative perspective, turn on lifecycle management. Remember, I showed you that you can say, hey, after 7 days of no access, move my data to infrequent access. It'll save you up to 92%, right? But obviously, if you have data that's constantly being read and being written to, then EFS is still cost effective because you're not paying for read or write. You're just paying for the underlying storage. But if you're storing the data and the data isn't being read or write, then you don't have to. Then you can just move it to a very low cost tier. Obviously, enable encryption at rest or in transit for your workloads. Create a backup plan using AWS Backup. Use AWS Systems Manager as well to manage your EFS clients. Use CloudWatch to monitor your credits, your throughput and IO limit as well. And from a cost perspective, I think general guidance, yes, always use AWS budget so that you can manage your costs effectively. So I want to end with by really giving you all some resources to get started. So we do have a lot of resources online that will really help you get bootstrapped and use EFS with containers and Lambda. So we have our technical documentation is fairly up to date. We have some reInvent 2020 sessions that were done virtually last year, but will really give you a good sense of how to get started. Goes into a little more detail because there's an ECS, there's a container specific session, there's a Lambda specific session. We have customers also coming in and going into detail about their architectures and how they use EFS with ECS and with ECS, EKS, and Lambda as well, right? So a lot of good sessions there. There are 8 sessions, highly recommend. And we have a lot of blogs as well that we have published over the past year in terms of best practices, use cases, reference architectures, and so on. Right. So really, a lot of resources for you to get started. So that's all I had. I hope this was really helpful. Any other questions that I can help answer? I am happy to take more questions if any of you have any. Anything, Anas? Quinn?
I think we're good.
I hope the session was useful. I didn't, and maybe many of you maybe you already answered them in the chat, but I hope this was helpful. So either no questions means you understood everything, or maybe you didn't quite follow. But I hope it's a format that you understood quite a lot and you're really excited about this.
Anand, I have one question or clarification.
Yeah.
Just to you mentioned a lot of use cases about using EFS, but we know that some of these use cases can work still with S3, right?
Yes.
So if you can highlight when to choose, like what's the criteria, like the breaker, because S3 is much cheaper.
Yes. So think about it. So I think the two main things I would say when you talk about S3, EFS and S3 are, I would say, three things. The first is API, right? So when I say API, what I essentially mean is talking file, right? So if your application accesses a lot of files, does a lot of read, write, continuous access on the files, editing, all of that stuff. So whether you're talking about images, videos, that kind of thing, then you really, or let's say machine learning models and so on. So you really, you're looking for, you really want, if your application speaks file, then by using EFS, you get very low latency and very high performance, right? And the reason it happens is because EFS is a local file system. It takes advantage of the Lambda cache, Lambda container cache. And so the first time when you, let's say you run a 5 GB machine learning model, it might take a little time because it downloads onto the cache. But the next time you do that, it's going to be super fast. Like it's going to be instantaneous. It's not going to go all the way over the network, download the model again, right? Same thing, let's say you're operating on a file, like it's a big video, right? It's a movie, right? You're not going to download the movie every single time you want to edit it or do something like that. So that's one, right? The next thing is, even from a cost perspective, if you're continuously accessing some of these files with EFS, you don't pay for requests, read or write requests, right? All you're paying is for the underlying storage. So if you're constantly, reading your machine learning model from tens of thousands of Lambda functions or instances or containers, right? With EFS, you get the predictability because hey, it doesn't matter how many I make, 1 million requests, I'm just going to be paying for storage, right? So I have, let's say, 1 terabyte of storage. I'm going to be paying for 1 terabyte of storage. Whether I make 100 requests, 1 million read requests, doesn't matter, right? So I think so. It also depends on the access pattern of the workload. So I would say whether your application really speaks file, right? Because EFS is a file system, so it's optimized for reading, editing files, and so on. Second is if you're looking for really that low latency and performance and the speed, and then the third is purely from a cost perspective as well. So if you're constantly reading or writing files, does that help?
Yeah. I was looking for the cost of the requests.
Yes.
And you just answered.
Yep.
So any other questions, guys? You have a good chance now. Anyway, thank you so much, Anand, for this
Thanks a lot.
deep dive into EFS. It's really beneficial and helpful.